The story began in the middle of a bright medieval fantasy world, where our young genius Barney had just completed another amazing invention to make life much more convenient for everyone. His elders are brother Cliff and sister Lucille. Immediately, everyone praised his incredible abilities, said that he had become famous throughout the city, and that everyone was grateful for his wonderful inventions that truly made their everyday life much simpler. His sister also hugged him tightly before their parents arrived, and proudly said that Barney was their greatest pride and joy. Thanks to the exceptional skills that Barney diligently acquired as a magical engineer, he quietly vowed to protect his beloved country and cherished family. It all began in the modern world, when a weary and unambitious man finally hit rock bottom, completely exhausted from his relentless daily work. Every morning he was woken by an irritating alarm clock, fight through suffocating crowds in a cramped, overcrowded carriage, and tiredly headed to his office. His boss constantly shouted at him, barking orders to finish an endless amount of material, and often demanded that he stay late, even though the official closing time had already passed. He felt as if he had no choice left and would have to obey the boss's orders. On that fateful day, when he finally finished the work far past midnight, he immediately rushed to the station, desperate not to miss the last train. But as he was rushing up the stairs, suddenly he was overwhelmed by a stunning wave of dizziness, and he threw himself down. The blow to the head was brutal, the body froze, consciousness instantly began to fade, and at that very moment a cold thought flashed through his mind. Is he really dying right now? Suddenly, childhood memories surged in his head, and he asked himself if it was a flash of memory before death. When he was just born, his parents tragically died, and he became an orphan, although everyone in the shelter was kind. The relentless loneliness from having no family grew stronger and stronger inside him. After finishing school, his heart was completely empty, and in the vile black company they used him as they pleased. He believed that his life was worth nothing at all, and doubted the very meaning of his existence, desperately trying to move forward. Tears rolled down his face, and he sincerely dreamed of being born in a family with boundless love in the next life. He wanted nothing more than to truly love someone and value himself. When his consciousness began to drown in absolute darkness, a strange, incredibly soft female voice gently called an unfamiliar name, Barney. When he slowly opened his eyes, a gentle woman appeared before him, apologizing for waking him, and tenderly said that it was time for his nauk. Unaware that he had been reborn as an infant, he silently asked himself what strange situation had happened. And at that very moment Scott appeared, and Barney became even more confused, although he was already bewildered because of that milk. He wondered if he had ended up in a hospital, but froze when he realized that the voice simply did not come out of his mouth. And he still could not understand how Dorothy managed so easily to carry such a big man like him. When Scott took the bottle of milk and gently put it into his mouth, that was when he understood he had turned into a child. Calmly sucking the bottle, he doubted everything to himself. After that devastating accident, he should not have been among the living. And looking around, he was surprised to realize that he was in a house he had never seen before. It was not so much a foreign country as a fantastic world, as if straight from the pages of a fairy tale. He thought that he had died and found himself in an unfamiliar place in the body of a baby. This could mean only one thing: he had truly been reborn. Looking at Scott and Dorothy, he suddenly realized that they were his new parents. It was then that the Warney brothers and sisters appeared. Their faces were shining, and enthusiastically showed them a beautiful golden flower that perfectly matched Barney's hair color. Lucille said she found it at a street food stall, and Cliff proudly admitted that they had collected their pocket money and bought that exquisite flower to give it to Barney as a special gift. Seeing them, Barney immediately understood these were definitely his older brothers and sisters. And Lucille gently handed him the flower, and then she confidently showed her blessing magic. A swarm of shimmering butterflies burst out and gracefully swirled around Barney, leaving him stunned and completely enchanted by this amazing spectacle. She sincerely wished him a bright future and that much happiness would come to him. This completely amazed him. Dorothy praised her for already being able to use blessing magic at such a young age, and Lucille proudly replied that she had worked very hard to learn this spell for her dear little brother. Seeing how the sister drew all the attention to herself, Cliff immediately declared that he also wanted to show Barney his cool side: impressive swordsmanship. Pulling a sword into the house on a cart was almost impossible, so Cliff promised Barney that the very next day he would show his sword skills, and assured him that he would definitely be able to protect his younger brother from any danger. At that moment, Lucille suddenly flew in and declared that she would protect Barney with her magic, but when they started arguing, Scott intervened, gently patted both of them on the heads, and said that they were both fully capable of protecting him as his devoted older brothers and sisters. Cliff mockingly remarked that he had supposedly always been Lucille's older brother, and she slyly advised him to simply modestly accept such praise in moments like these. So Dorothy asked them to help with dinner, and how Barney watched that sweet exchange of tenderness between them. Finally, he understood what a truly happy family looks like. The next day, when the family was riding in the carriage, he felt that he was no longer alone. Barney was truly enchanted by the amazing landscapes of that magical world. And that day in the afternoon, they set off to the great cathedral in the royal capital to test their working abilities. Scott was a respected silver master and had a workshop in the royal capital, so they decided to visit him first and then go to the cathedral together. Soon Cliff was noticed. He was diligently training with a sword, effortlessly cutting thick bark from a huge tree with stunning speed and precision. Seeing this, Barney looked at Scott in surprise, and his father quickly explained that it was just Cliff's usual training. Cliff was naturally a skilled swordsman and dreamed of becoming famous as an adventurer, exploring dangerous dungeons all over the world. He admitted that he once left a strange stone alone because he thought it might come in handy someday, and now promised Cliff to introduce him to his acquaintance, a seasoned traveler, if he could break the stone with his sword replica. He also added that Lucille naturally has a talent for being a sorceress, and her magical talent is immense and undeniable. Barney was stunned with surprise when he learned about the natural talents and impressive abilities of his brothers and sisters. He also thought that Scott's workshop would have no successor since he was a rare silver master, and Scott proudly said that he personally made Cliff's sword replica. Then Barney instantly pointed towards the workshop, but Scott apologized for not letting him go further and explained. The workshop had a lot of dangerous equipment and complex tools. It was clear that Barney was visibly disappointed. Scott gently stroked his head and said he would consider it a special favor if during the upcoming evaluation ceremony he showed a talent for the craft. But in the end, he wanted the children to go their own ways if they could truly follow the life path they most desired. Just at that moment, Dorothy called him for help. Barney wondered what professions and unique abilities would he receive after the evaluation ceremony. From the blue cliffs suddenly appeared a precious sword. Suddenly it broke in half, and tears instantly ran down his face. With a trembling voice, he said that his father tried so hard to make this sword just for him. Barney panicked when he saw him crying, and he wondered if he could somehow fix the sword, although he had not yet discovered any power. At that very moment, a transparent screen miraculously appeared before them. It showed lists of items and necessary materials. Barney could not truly understand what that mysterious screen was for, but it seemed he could make a choice as if playing a game. The screen suddenly showed an unlocking and revival menu. There were options for enhancement and repair, which could be used only once as part of his bonuses after revival. But Barney was really confused. And then it dawned on him. If magic here is reality, then such a possibility could very well exist. He carefully selected exactly those materials that were needed to truly use this mysterious magic. For this specific repair, materials and magma ore were required, but Barney, it seemed, could not immediately get that ore. In a moment of anxiety, Barney quickly glanced around the vicinity and noticed that his brother's necklace was barely glowing. Although Cliff seemed not to notice this at all, there was no time to hesitate. Barney began wildly waving his tiny little hands and squeaking loudly, desperately trying to get Cliff's attention. When Cliff approached him, he smiled gently and apologized for showing him such a terribly tearful side of himself, since his brother could not see that mysterious light. Barney was increasingly convinced that he probably possessed some extraordinary power. Without hesitation, Barney sharply tugged the necklace and pulled Cliff toward him. He stumbled forward, and Barney, without delay, stretched out his tiny hand toward the broken sword. Instantly, the sword, as if by magic, hovered in the air, wrapped in a magical glow for the family that gave him such overwhelming, unconditional love. If he could do at least something, Barney was ready to give everything he had for them. Soon the sword became perfectly new again, as if freshly forged, and Cliff was stunned. He froze in amazement, seeing the incredible skill of his younger brother, but as soon as he felt the touch of his sword, he realized that she had become even more polished and perfectly balanced than in the previous state. Without hesitating for a moment, Cliff held the stance and swung the sword with incredible force. A solid boulder shattered into pieces, and Barney froze speechless before this stunning display of strength. Cliff, shone with joy, finally managed to break that stubborn rock, and he sincerely thanked Barney for immediately helping him. Hearing the dull thud from the powerful collision, Scott and Dorothy rushed to the spot and froze, seeing that the stone was now cracked. Cliff, full of excitement, told them that Barney miraculously repaired his sword and was now able to break a stone with it, while Scott carefully inspected the sword. His gaze turned to Barney, and he cast him a puzzled look, for Barney himself still could not fully believe the extent of his powers. Scott sighed with relief, sincerely glad that his sons were unharmed, but looked suspiciously at the Cliffs, and asked him once again to split the stone, because he simply could not believe that he had performed such a powerful move on his own. Soon, when they reached the cathedral and bowed to the pastor, he gently lifted Barney, jokingly announced him as the star of the show. In this world, there were fundamental things, professions that showed what you were meant for and allowed you to use special skills according to your role. If someone has a hidden special power, it can be awakened, and thanks to individual training, this person will be able to master a rare profession. According to custom, Immediately after birth, everyone was taken to this important ritual to find out what they were destined to work as. Soon the pastor led them to a quiet room where on a pedestal rested a neatly polished crystal ball. The pastor aloud wondered what job Barney would have if his older brother was a promising swordsman and his older sister a powerful mage. He carefully grabbed Barney's tiny hand and gently pressed it to the crystal ball, which showed exactly the same status screen that had already appeared before Barney. The pastor was stunned when he saw the powerful dazzling light bursting from the crystal, and immediately told everyone about Barney's incredible profession. He was an engineer who created magical devices. It was an extremely rare profession that the pastor himself had never seen in all his years of service, and he was even more intrigued that it was in the same field as Scott's Barney was more than qualified to potentially become the successor of the workshop. With a warm, sincere smile, Scott said that ultimately the choice of the future remains with Barney, and as a father, he is happy to respect and support any path his son chooses. His relatives also exploded with joy. Their faces shone upon hearing his soothing and loving words. When Scott gently took him in his arms, Barney finally realized that he was given a real treasure, a chance to live in a sincere and loving family. And now he would do anything to protect the happiness he found next to his beloved family. His eyes shone with burning determination. He vowed in this new world to become a worthy engineer of magical devices and to become unquestionably strong for the sake of his beloved family. On that clear sunny day, the sky was bright blue, and Barney did not take his eyes off Cliff, who was training with a sword. His skill had clearly increased. A year had already passed since he underwent the evaluation ritual, and the elder brother tirelessly honed his swordsmanship. After the day when Cliff managed to cut Iraq with a simple sword replica, Scott arranged a meeting for him with an adventurer. As for Barney, he still could not understand what it was like to be an engineer of magical devices. There was a chance to test his abilities, but he was afraid that the family would not allow him such experiments. Seeing how his brother relentlessly devoted himself to exhausting training, Barney decided to put his thoughts aside and instead just enjoy the day. After all, it was an important day for his family. Soon, when everyone was riding in the carriage, Scott noticed that Lucille's admission to the academy was not far off. And Dorothy suddenly threw out the idea, let's have a picnic before that happens. This year Lucille turns 7 years old, and the fact that she was a great mage exempted her from the entrance exam to the Royal Academy. Moreover, she was admitted classes would start in a week. At first, Lucille was happy about this too, but it was clear it was painful for her to part with her family. The academy was a boarding school, and it turned out that she would see her relatives only during long vacations, so loneliness seemed inevitable. To lift her spirits, Cliff jokingly tousled her hair and asked her not to make a sad face, assuring her that her school life would definitely be fun. Soon they came across an amazing place. There was a lake nearby, and lush, beautiful trees grew around it. That day, Barney had a secret plan and decided to create many precious memories with his sister Lucille. They froze, stunned by the beauty of this place. Scott admitted that it was a hidden gem near the royal capital, which he had found when he was still an adventurer. He explained that monsters were not seen here. A barrier of the royal magical core was in effect. Although sometimes stronger, smarter creatures broke through it, it was believed that they avoided this area due to the proximity of human settlements. Hearing this, Barney wondered if Scott had once been an adventurer too, and although it was undoubtedly dangerous due to the constant presence of formidable dungeons and various monsters, a fierce curiosity ignited in Barney. Then Scott thoughtfully advised Dorothy to give Barney a talisman and to hand another one to Cliff. His magic seemed to have run out. When Dorothy gently placed a thin chain around Barney's neck, he immediately recognized it. The pendant was exactly the same as the one he once used to repair his broken sword. Scott indifferently remarked that it was a simple protective amulet with a magical aura, but added that it could quite possibly be used for a completely different purpose. After a brief warm conversation, he decided to take a leisurely walk around the lake with his beloved family. While they explored the surroundings, every minute together was worth its weight in gold. They were truly bonding as a family. They encountered various local animals and birds and wove beautiful flower wreaths. They even tried fishing around the lake, and when Lucille's fishing line suddenly started tugging hard, everyone immediately grabbed the sturdy rod. And together they pulled out a huge catch. Soon an appetizing fish dish appeared before them, and Lucille admitted that she wished Barney could also taste the delicious dish she had caught herself. But Cliff immediately intervened and proudly said that it was thanks to the right support that they were able to catch such a huge fish. But she exclaimed that she was the one who pulled it out. It was then that Barney realized that getting distracted was not an option, and the perfect moment to speak had come. His face instantly lit up with joy, and in a squeaky, determined voice, he barely pronounced the words, but still managed to shout Lucille and sincerely express his admiration. Barney was truly proud that he could say a few words as he had practiced. While Lucille was overwhelmed by her little brothers, an unexpected confession suddenly appeared. So Dorothy Arid smiled warmly and said that Lucille was incredibly lucky her dear brother calls her older sister. Since then, Barney dreamed of gathering warm memories with his family for a lifetime and hoped that with each day there would be more of them. After they enjoyed a wonderful lunch, Cliff asked their father for permission to take a little walk around the area with Lucille and Barney, and Scott only warned them not to stray too far from the picnic spot. After some time, as they delved deeper under the dense forest canopy, Lucille impatiently asked Cliff about the acquaintance their father promised to introduce to him. Cliff replied that by law, the Adventurers Guild only accepts members from the age of 13, and since he was only 9, he was merely an apprentice to that person and still far from dungeon expeditions and great adventures. He sternly told Lucille, dungeons are not places you can just enter casually, and not all dungeons had reliable protective barriers and special safe zones like the one they dared to venture into now. Confused by his words, she said that when he becomes a true adventurer, he will inevitably have to go to such dangerous places. And as if accidentally, he revealed that he harbored a dream in his heart that he wanted to fulfill. But when she insisted further, he suggested they stop this conversation for now and return to their parents. At that moment, Arnie heard a strange rustling coming from the dense bushes. When he tried to look further, he immediately asked Cliff to check that area, but Cliff, boldly pushing aside those hidden bushes to see what was hiding. They shuddered upon encountering a huge snow-white wolf lying before them. Stunned by its enormity and sudden appearance, Barney wondered if it was some kind of monster, because ordinary wolves could not be so gigantic. Without hesitation, Cliff ordered Lucille to hide firmly behind him along with Barney, and she quickly exclaimed, her voice trembling with fear, "Is he seriously going to fight that monster alone?" He assured her that he would distract the creature while they ran to their parents to warn them of the danger. But although he appeared brave on the outside, it was clear how truly scared and confused he was. Barney wondered if there was another way to save everyone from that fierce monster. But the wolf slowly rose to its paws and, trembling, took a few steps toward them. Suddenly, it sharply turned its head and averted its piercing gaze, and when Barney saw that the beast was looking away, he thought that the wolf might not be hostile but instantly realized it was clearly suffering from something, possibly pain. Still in defensive mode, Cliff ordered Lucille to take Barney and run, but she refused to leave him behind. But Barney thought it was very likely that this wolf was not an ordinary monster at all. Moreover, recalling how his father had previously spoken about higher-ranking monsters and more intelligent beings, he thought to himself, if that wolf really was a higher intelligent being, then it is quite logical that he ended up in the zone under the protective barrier, and then there is a chance that they will be able to communicate with him. Out of nowhere, Barney's talisman began to softly glow. The familiar transparent screen appeared before him again. He realized that this was the same situation as before. Now he definitely knew that they would manage to safely get out of this situation. Without wasting a moment, he squeezed the glowing talisman in his hand and at the same time grabbed the scarf, pouring all his extraordinary magical power into it. Then he carefully handed Cliff the scarf just filled with magic, and gestured to him, "Put this on the giant white wolf." Lucille, of course, hesitated due to possible danger, but Cliff trusted the intuition of his younger brother. Since the formidable monster also did not attack them, they cautiously approached the creature. Slowly approaching the wolf, he sincerely apologized for hastily pointing a sword at him and assured the beast that they would not harm him if he did not attack. When he came closer, the wolf surprisingly sat before him in submission, and this gave Cliff the opportunity to carefully throw the scarf over his neck, an unexpected turn of events. The wolf noticed that the scarf was quite nice, and Cliff replied that he was sincerely glad. Then the majestic beast proudly introduced himself as the divine beast Alberos and inquired whether they would fulfill his request. Although Cliff initially agreed instantly, without hesitation, he suddenly froze like Lucille and Barney when everyone finally understood. The divine being spoke like a human. It was completely impossible. The wolf calmly settled in front of Barney's carriage and said that it was all apparently because of the scarf he had tied, so now they could understand his words. Barney was wildly happy that the translator he created worked flawlessly and that the wolf did not seem hostile to them, but he was even more intrigued by the wolf's urgent request. It was then that Lucille asked what had happened to that majestic beast. It seemed to be suffering. Alberos sadly admitted that he had come here seeking refuge after an illness and unfortunately had lost mobility in his body. He asked hopefully if they happened to have a potion for recovery at that critical moment. Lucille instantly felt this was a magical poison, and when Cliff began to inquire about it in more detail, she told him that it was a toxin that infects the very magical energy flowing through the body, and as soon as it penetrates, the affected body gradually loses all mobility. She explained that magical poison can occur naturally, or that in this region there might simply be some specific variation of it. Cliff, sensing the seriousness, said that this was an extraordinary situation and insisted they must immediately ensure that the father reports this to the Royal Guild of Mages. But first of all, Lucille embraced the wool stick fur. and cast healing magic on it. Alberos froze with admiration. Such powerful magic immediately eased his condition, and Cliff was in complete shock seeing that his sister also knew how to heal with magic. She admitted that although she could use it, she had not yet mastered it perfectly. She was learning only to a certain extent, just in case something ever happened to their beloved family. Albero, filled with deep gratitude for her timely help, humbly asked if he could somehow repay her. To everyone's surprise, she casually asked the majestic beast if he would agree to live with her family. Barney thought to himself that Lucille was a smart girl, so there was probably something deeper behind her hasty decision. His hopes quickly faded when she joyfully admitted that she had always dreamed of having a big dog. Cliff gently explained that Alberos was not a dog at all and had his own will to decide his fate. However, Alberos declared without hesitation that he had long been passionately interested in human society life, hinting at readiness to accept. Soon they cautiously approached the parents and asked for permission to bring Alberos into the family, and to their great relief, Scott and Dorothy hardly objected. Moreover, Dorothy thought it would be great advertising for the workshop. Meanwhile, Barney could not get rid of the thought, was she really going to turn the divine being into a simple mascot? He was even more impressed that Cliff had already given him a familiar nickname, Al. Scott said that it was Barney who gave Albero the magical scarf. He put all his soul and heart into it, making it especially to protect his older brothers and sisters. He warmly thanked Barney, and they gently accepted Albera into their family because no one seemed to be against such an arrangement, for helping in a difficult moment. Since then, Alberos swore to protect them as his own dear family. Thus their special family grew, and several years passed in peace and harmony, until all the children promised to set off each on their own path to finally realize their own dreams. The scene smoothly shifted us to a magnificent estate, where a messenger anxiously informed Lord Zorian about an outbreak of poisonous magic several years ago, and said that although the root of the problem was eliminated then, everything seemed to be returning again. He also asked whether Lord Zorian would agree for the Royal Magical Corps to begin an investigation of the affected territory. The morning was just beginning, and Scott ordered Barney and Alberos to urgently make a delivery, promising him a reward, a valuable piece of magical ore. Barney immediately agreed in a decisive tone and rushed to deliver the goods together with Alberos. They say Barney was shining with excitement, especially upon learning that the reward was magical ore. Barney explained that magical ore for an engineer of magical devices like him was absolutely indispensable. Over the past few years, Barney slowly and steadily began to understand the power that engineers of magical tools possess. Magical ores were incredibly helpful in crafting and repairing various materials, but to obtain truly special items, several decisive conditions were also required. First were the recipes and levels. He had to unlock specific recipes listing materials and methods, but they only unlocked as his professional level grew. The second was the magical ore itself. It endowed items with special functions, and the innate magical power of these rare ores was extremely necessary, regardless of his current level. But recently, the extraction has significantly fallen, and because of this, prices have soared. Obtaining these vital ores has become incredibly difficult. He believed that pocket money was, of course, a pleasant thing, but acquiring a serious portion of magic ore was still a long way off. Alberos could not help but say that it was precisely because of this that Barney was recognized for his usual diligence and hard work. Soon they each reached their place and skillfully handed over the goods to the person who was waiting for them. Barney sincerely thanked Alberos for the invaluable help and asked if he wanted to go to the diner. He replied that he would have a hearty T-bone steak. As they were walking to the diner, the kind lady greeted them both and, without hesitation, without wasting time, they immediately ordered Omuris and a T-bone steak for themselves. From a hidden corner of the noisy room, Dorothy peeked outside, smiled warmly and gently, waved to them. And Albero said that it was truly wonderful to see that she was much better. From the very beginning her health was quite weak, but recently since she became a bright star of the Ants Cafe, it seems she is much better. Barney could not help but think. Since Alberos entered their family, everyone seemed to have blossomed, becoming livelier and happier, and he believed that this was a true blessing of the divine beast. It was then that Cliff and his friend Petty entered the diner. Seeing Barney, Cliff immediately asked if he was helping his father together with Alberos, and Barney replied that they had just finished work. Petty warmly greeted them with a friendly smile, and Cliff headed to the counter to place their orders. However, when he approached, Barney apologized to her for seemingly interrupting their date because she, it seemed, had finally been left alone with his brother. And as soon as she heard his remark, her face instantly turned as red as a beet. As soon as Cliff approached, she hurriedly blurted out that he was just her friend. Cliff had no idea about her feelings, and his sharp reply shattered her hopes and broke her heart. Cliff and Patty, both 14, were fiery members of an adventure group in Kajuru. It was so obvious that tender young relationships could blossom between them, but Cliff seemed not to notice most of it. Patty was the beloved daughter of the respected party leader Zach. and he treated both the daughter and Cliff so tenderly that he had effectively become a second father to him. And Patty herself sincerely considered Barney and Alberos dear members of her family. He started a conversation with Barney's brother and asked if they were setting out on a new adventure. But Cliff calmly waved it off and explained that they had just finished a routine task of herding the herd and were now returning to report to the guild. Without hesitation, Patty intervened and directly stated that they would immediately set out to gather magical ore after that. But before she could add a word, Cliff sharply placed his hand over her mouth, cutting her off mid-sentence. But it was already too late, and Barney was not naive enough to miss such an important hint. Magical aura is expensive to buy, but gathering it yourself cost nothing, yet dangers lurked at every step. If Barney somehow managed to get it, he knew he could finally use the unlocked recipes and level up his skills. But even before he could ask Cliff to take him along, Cliff had already refused without any hesitation. Cliff said firmly that curiosity is, of course, wonderful, but Barney is only 6 years old. He noted that although mining magical ore did not always throw them into dungeons, it did not mean they would not encounter a dangerous monster. Cliff had every right to be wildly worried about his younger brother, and he did not want anything bad to happen to him at all. At that very moment, Patty intervened and calmed him even more, whispering to Barney that she would definitely help him. At that very moment, she asked with a sly smile if Cliff forgot the basic rules of KJRU. If something goes wrong with the team plan, immediately report it directly to the leader, and ultimately everything is decided by his final word. Although the guild protocol required this, Cliff firmly insisted that Barney was not an adventure from the very beginning. In an unexpected turn of events, Dorothy came with their orders and a smile. Kunlai calmly assured them that everything would be perfectly fine. She added that if Cliff really worries so much about his little brother, then he should protect him himself. She casually mentioned that Scott was once on Zach's team too, so she was sure and he would definitely give his consent. She tightly squeezed Barney's tiny little hands and gently asked if he could properly express his feelings, why he so passionately longed for magic or something like that, and why he fervently dreamed of becoming an engineer of magical instruments. Barney immediately agreed, and Dorothy immediately suggested going to the guild together. Soon they reached the bustling Adventurers Guild, and Barney lit up with excitement seeing the lively atmosphere. After all, it was his first time in such a place. Yet he resolutely slapped himself on the cheeks, reminding himself that it was not the time to look at the stars in his eyes. He needed the leader to notice him. Cliff led him to the tavern where Kajaru was based. He assured Barney that it might be scary at first, but advised him to just behave as usual. Petty said that Zach looked tough and more like a bandit leader, but reassured Barney that in reality he was very soft-hearted. Yet despite this, Barney could not calm down. As soon as they stepped over the threshold of the tavern, Barney froze. The impressive appearance of the Kajar leaders left him speechless. Petty casually remarked that it seemed he was too nervous, but Zach replied that simple things often turn out to be the hardest. His attention instantly shifted to Barney. Barney, with a hesitant voice, introduced himself to Zach, and at the same time said that he looked quite similar to Dorothy. Meanwhile, Cliff confessed they wanted to ask him for a favor. Zach threw puzzled glances at Barney, and Petty threatened if he looked so scary, he would drive him away. Zach asked what he was asking for, and Barney Bradley suddenly said that he wanted to join Cliff and Petty in their magic or expedition, and even asked for permission to go with them. Zach fixed a fierce look on him and coldly asked, why? Although Barney was terribly frightened by his threatening behavior, he gathered all his courage into a fist and told him about his profession, confessing that because of that mission he wanted to master magic and use its power to create even more of his unique inventions. He sincerely admitted that he wanted to become a real adult as soon as possible, and sincerely confessed that with all his heart he wanted to protect his loving family. Everyone around was simply stunned to hear his true feelings. And Zach unexpectedly patted himself on the head and said that he had passed the test. The anxious expression on Barney's face quickly melted into pure joy. He thanked him, and Zach with a sly smile said that now Barney had undoubtedly proven why Scott always proudly called him his pride and joy. However, when only young children set out on such a dangerous adventure, the team looked too fragile for a real quest. So Zach decisively called for help from another of his faithful gilded adventurers, Joseph. And he asked him to go with them. Joseph might have seemed young, but he was personally Zach's trusted man and had impressive skills to protect the children from any danger. With a reassuring smile, he encouraged them to successfully complete the quests and wished them a safe journey. As the hours crawled by, they finally reached home and sat sincerely before their parents, desperately asking Scott for permission to let Barney go on an adventure. Barney insisted that he wanted to grow further and hone his skills, but Scott seemed hesitant about this decision. He said that even a simple quest for gathering was teeming with monsters. Cliff soothingly said that Scott could trust him unconditionally. He would protect Barney with all his might in case of danger and return him home unharmed. Dorothy quietly nudged Scott, hinting that it was worth giving the children more independence. They had grown up so quickly and so much. And Scott himself was stunned. The children were growing much faster than he could ever imagine. The next day, they were all fully equipped and eagerly waiting to set off on the adventure together. Scott sincerely relied on Joseph and said he counted on him, and Joseph kept repeating that he would carefully take care of everything. With a light, joking tap on their backs, Scott pushed them forward, a gesture that instantly gave them a surge of confidence. Hours passed. They were making their way through the forest in their carriage, and Joseph advised them to rest well, explaining that it was almost a 2-hour ride to the Rodney Valley where the magical ore was. The deeper they went through the dense forest, the more Barney inquired about that forbidden area they were passing. Alberos noticed that it seemed to lead straight to the very forest where they first met. And that area soaked with magical poison. Joseph said that 5 years had passed since magical poison was first discovered in that forest, and the Royal Magical Corps took about a year to thoroughly survey the area. Although the trade routes were already protected, people still believed that the forest and its lakes were contaminated with magical poison. Hearing this news, Barney gently said to Alberos that it was a bit lonely here after all. This place was filled with so many of their dear memories. Eventually, they finally reached the designated place and immediately rushed to collect valuable magical ore. When they arrived at the enchanted Rodney Valley, Barney simply froze at the beauty that unfolded before him. Joseph warned them. Although the monster level in that valley might be low, truly formidable creatures sometimes appear, so everyone should be on guard and not relax. Their first task was to scout the ore deposits, but Barney did not waste a minute and took out his newest invention. He took a mysterious round crystal ring from his pouch and proudly raised it before everyone. Cliff said he immediately understood. When Scott gave Barney permission that evening, Barney had something clever in mind, and he even asked about his new, unusual item. Instead of empty words, Barney decided to show what he was capable of and let his work speak for itself. As soon as he stretched out his tiny little hands, a beam of light brightly directed itself in a certain direction, as if clearly hinting that something important lay ahead. He then revealed, "This is a magical device created specifically to detect mana stones, and it precisely showed where they lay." Barney wanted nothing more than to truly help in this reconnaissance. Joseph was sincerely impressed with his invention, and immediately decided to use the device to continue the investigation. Step by step, following the light in one direction, they finally came upon a lush ravine. Its harsh landscape was deeply dotted with countless shimmering magical ores. On the other hand, Barney looked truly proud and at the same time sighed with relief. His careful work with magic ore, obtained after the previous assignment, had finally paid off. Joseph was wildly impressed that he himself was able to craft such incredibly convenient tools. However, Barney modestly admitted that this matter had certain limitations, but added that with the necessary materials, nothing was impossible. Cliff proudly showed his sword and told Joseph that it was masterfully made by Barney, to which Joseph enthusiastically replied that maybe next time he would have to order one for himself too. After that, the group stepped forward and, wasting no time, rushed to collect those valuable magical horrors. They all gathered together and began to harvest magical ores on this harsh, rocky land. When they gather a considerable amount of these resources, Joseph was stunned. In such a short time he had mined so much ore. He winked and jokingly said that with that amazing ring, they could compete with the elite mages of the Royal Academy in detection magic, and all without those heavy demaster spells. Joseph guessed that with his amazing magical tool, Barney could take on any task, but Barney modestly admitted that he doubted he would ever match the magic of his older sister. Entreaty, Joseph asked if it was about Lucille, whose tuition Cliff had partially paid for, and this completely caught Cliff off guard. He sharply warned Joseph not to tell such things right in front of them. Embarrassed, Barney asked, wasn't Lucille completely exempt from tuition fees? Pushing Cliff to slip up, he finally admitted, although Lucille was on a scholarship, her tuition was not fully waived, only partially. He said it was not an amount he couldn't pay, and he knew well their father was definitely squeezing himself for Lucille. That is why he needed to become a real adventurer as soon as possible to support the family with money. But when Barney asked him if he would fulfill his personal dreams, Cliff confidently told him that he had his own dream to become #1 among adventurers in the whole world. He said that just imagining a future where he goes where no one has ever reached, grabs priceless treasures, and bravely saves people from terrible monsters, his heart wildly pounded with excitement. Besides, he cared so much about his family that the very thought of truly being able to help everyone made him wildly happy. He proudly declared that he would win a bunch of awards and expand their workshop to epic proportions. With unwavering determination, Barney declared that he himself would become the best engineer of magical devices in the capital and provide for his beloved family. When Cliff heard this sincere bow, he instantly hugged him tightly and said he was truly proud of his incredible younger brother. In this tender, sincere moment, Patty's gaze swept around and suddenly she noticed scattered, blood-stained weapons. She couldn't understand why there would be weapons in such a place at all. She immediately informed Joseph about the abandoned weapons, as if hinting that they might have belonged to adventurers who had encountered terrible monsters. Joseph whispered that they might not be completely alone, danger could still be lurking nearby, so he wisely advised to leave quickly since they had already gathered quite a lot of precious magicor. However, his face darkened as soon as he felt the ominous presence of a sinister entity, and Albero also involuntarily raised his defenses. Wasting no time, Joseph instantly ordered everyone to hold their positions and stay alert. Barney was left completely confused and frightened. Their behavior suddenly and sharply changed. Out of nowhere, a giant monster appeared and suddenly lunged at them with its huge fists, but they barely dodged the blow. Suddenly appearing, it left them completely bewildered. Its incredible power sent shock waves through the air as it smashed the very ground with its bare hands. Albero instantly grabbed Barney firmly with his fangs and immediately called to flee the place, but the other three remained steadfast and declared that this was their territory. They assured the Alberos to leave these troubles to them, and all three immediately rushed at the beast. Finally, they managed to hit. The blow wounded its massive body. She growled fiercely and swiftly swiped her claws in defense, and then Joseph, to his surprise, noticed that the wound they inflicted healed instantly. After that, Cliff seized the chance and boldly leapt on it from behind. But the cunning monster anticipated the attack and responded lightning fast with a powerful blow that threw him across the entire field and slammed him against the nearest wall with incredible force. The monster struck Patty fiercely, tossed her up and rolled her on the ground, and Joseph reacted instantly and threw a smoke grenade at it. Giving them only a moment to catch their breath, Joseph ordered the rest of the team to immediately flee from here and rush to the capital for reinforcements while he bravely held off the attack, at least for now. Patty stubbornly objected and insisted that they would never leave him behind and run away. But Joseph decisively said that the elders must protect the younger ones, and that is why Zack took him with him. When the smoke began to clear, Joseph shouted and fiercely ordered them to run. Barney knew Joseph risked his life to help them escape, and his selfless efforts would be in vain if they stayed here even a little longer. But to leave a comrade behind was simply unthinkable. It would be a betrayal of their friendship. But before Barney could react, huge stone boulders rained down from the cliff. But Albero instantly flew to the scene and with incredible speed tore him away from inevitable danger. It noticed that the monster was undoubtedly of some strange breed, and that even it itself would not have enough strength if it fought to protect everyone. If anyone still asked Barney about his decisive choice, whether he wanted to flee or wished to stand his ground before the formidable enemy, suddenly the crystal ring on his hand shone incredibly brightly. The rays pointed directly towards the recent landslide. The ring powerfully reacted to something hidden deep within that broken rock. And that dazzling light clearly emphasized that whatever it was not ordinary magic, or he believed that it could be a great magicor, and only that could break through that terrible dead end. He instantly glanced at the discarded weapon, and overwhelmed by a surge of determination, decided to go after it. Without hesitation, Albero lunged at the monster and powerfully bit into its giant hand. Meanwhile, Alberni urgently asked Joseph to buy them 3 crucial minutes. Still doubting his intentions, Joseph suggested they run, but Barney sharply tore his hand away, and in a decisive tone, exclaimed that he still possessed the incredible power of his abilities as an engineer of magical instruments. He bravely reproached Joseph for even thinking of leaving them alone in danger, insisting that they would all return together alive and safe. He asked them to unwaveringly believe in him. His extraordinarily brave words stunned Joseph and the others. Joseph quietly chuckled and said that their squad would make no sense if he, after all, could not trust his comrades. He also asked Barney to make sure that when they returned to the capital, he would forge him a real, truly good weapon. They then gathered their strength to implement their plan and hold the monster for 3 minutes. And Joseph also said he would show them how to rake in money by the shovel. While the hairless Alberos fought fiercely with the fierce monster, Barney desperately asked them to win him 3 crucial minutes so he could create the necessary magical tool. Joseph agreed without hesitation and ordered Cliff and Petty to stick together, coordinate their strikes as soon as the enemy paid attention to him, while Barney called Albero back. As soon as the divine beast swiftly jumped to his side, it turned to Joseph and persistently said, "Believe in your strength." The 3 tensely prepared to engage in battle with the monster. Barney asked Alberos to get a large magical ore from behind the broken stone wall, and he himself quickly began to gather all the necessary iron materials. Meanwhile, Cliff thought to himself, slightly irritated. Although he did not yet have the strength to change their situation on his own, he could not believe that he had to rely so much on his younger brother fiercely rushing at the beast. He could not help but call himself miserable in his soul. Saint Barney desperately tries to protect everyone. Cliff resolutely decided that now was not the time to doubt his abilities, and again rushed at the monster. He told himself, for years he had continuously trained to protect the family and become a role model for his little brother. He was unwaveringly determined not to let his dear dream of becoming a great traveler shatter at that decisive moment, and under no circumstances to give up on his potential. As long as Cliff did not stop his ruthless attacks on the beast, Joseph indifferently noted that acting independently would usually be considered a serious breach of discipline. Joseph and Petty did not retreat for a moment, and boldly rushed into battle with the terrifying monster. Instead, Barney carefully gathered all the necessary materials, and Alberos generously gave him a huge amount of powerful magicore, which suddenly shone brightly and struck Barney with its dazzling light. Meanwhile, the fierce roar of the beast shook the earth stones fell and shattered as it lunged at Cliff with its razor-sharp claws. But Cliff remained unshaken and bravely repelled the destructive attack with his sword. Joseph and Petty also rushed to help, holding back the onslaught with their combined forces. Together their sharp blades cut through its fearsome claws, but the relentless beast did not retreat, and with one powerful swing of its huge paw knocked them down, throwing them to the ground with wild force. As soon as the monster smiled slyly, it instantly froze, noticing Barney's sudden absence. Meanwhile, still wounded, Cliff declared his defeat and, surprisingly, said that the chance they all wove together would not be in vain. When they intervened in time, Barney appeared with Alberos and released a dazzling beam of light that struck the beast with incredible force. Leaving a huge gaping hole in its chest, the monster heavily collapsed to the ground. This caused a massive explosion. A deadly cloud of poisonous gas rose, instantly poisoning the air around them. Joseph loudly asked if it was really magical poison and immediately ordered everyone to cover their mouths. Barney could not comprehend all this noise, but before he could make sense of anything, Cliff rushed forward and instantly embraced him, tears of relief rolling from his eyes as he realized Barney was safe. Barney froze from the flood of his brother's emotions and simply suggested they go home together. But Joseph simply could not comprehend how magical poison could have escaped from such a strange monster right in this seemingly safe place. Yet he wisely decided to set aside his worries. Everyone survived, and that was enough for him, but they had no idea that a strange shadow was hiding behind, carefully watching their every step. Thus ended the terrifying adventure in the Rodney Valley. The approach to the forest through the canyon was instantly blocked by direct order of Zack. After the fight, Cliff and Barney returned home, both covered in blood and bruises. Deep worry was written on the parents' faces, but immense relief overwhelmed them when they rushed to tightly embrace their children. When this adventure seemed finally over, Barney believed they would return to their peaceful everyday life, but fate had other plans for him. On a beautiful, ordinary day, Barney, together with Alberos, visited his aunt's snack bar, and his aunt greeted him with a warm smile, asking if he had come again on some errand. He replied that he was going to help his father in the workshop, but looking around the strangely quiet surroundings, he noticed that the place was completely empty for lunch. She admitted that since the incident with Barney's team in the Rodney Canyon, the number of customers had decreased, and this had been going on for quite some time. Barney said that most visitors to the snack bar were adventurers. She gloomily noted that after the sudden closure of the Rodney Valley, where magicore was safely mined, many adventurers seemed to hastily move their bases away from the royal capital due to the sharp decline in trade. She anxiously remarked that shops like hers, which heavily depended on those resources and the adventures they attracted, were going through hard times. Putting her complaints aside, she apologized for the gloomy tone of the conversation and asked what orders he had. Shortly after returning home, Barney thoughtfully noticed that the magical poison was still being persistently investigated in the royal capital. And now, as its effects were spreading throughout the entire capital, it became clear fixing this would not be easy. He wondered if he, an engineer of magical devices, could help somehow so that adventurers would stay in the capital. Just then, he noticed a huge crowd of people in the distance and began to look at it more closely. Scott shouted to him over the noise, asking for help to calm the noisy crowd. To Barney's surprise, the crowd immediately rushed to him. Faces shone with admiration, and people eagerly asked him to make weapons for them. One of them said excitedly that he had heard about Barney from Joseph of Mirage, claiming that the weapons he makes are undoubtedly the best in the capital. Barney literally beamed from such praise. And he instantly thought, what if his weapons became widely known among adventurers? In that case, there would be a great chance that even more people would come to the capital specifically for his skill. He was confident that this would give Scott's workshop an economic boost, and with a determined expression on his face, he said that as an engineer of magical instruments, he really knows how to make the necessary things. And he also, calming everyone down, promised he would personally make weapons for everyone and take full responsibility for it. Immediately after his sincere confession, people enthusiastically demanded weapons created precisely for their personal needs and individual characteristics. Then the action moved to a respected academy, where a mysterious figure with strange feet approached a scientist named Evans, inquiring whether he was the one who persistently studies magical poison. Evans confidently said that he introduced himself as an ecologist and informed the man that he had been researching magical poisons for many years. The man replied eerily calmly that magical poison could produce new effects, which truly surprised Evans. The The man asked once again if he was ready to cooperate in experiments. Days past, the incident in the Rodinio Valley was already fading like a distant memory, but there were no signs of improvement. Barney could only do what was within his power, so he came to the Guild of Adventurers to deliver the ordered items, simultaneously greeting Zack and Joseph. Zack waved his hand friendly and invited him to drink with them. Joseph smiled and said that Barney's weapons had already gained fame throughout the capital, and Kajuri was also extremely popular among adventurers. But Joseph sensed a barely noticeable unease in Barney, and gently asked what was troubling him. Barney, with a heavy sigh, noticed that the liveliness of the capital was slowly fading, but thought they needed to keep going despite the difficulties. After that alarming event, there were fewer and fewer adventurers in the capital. That was why he was so worried. Zack said somewhat irritably that Zorian was overdramatizing, and there was no reason at all to completely ban these records. Barney asked if Zorian had really decided to impose such a strict blockade, and Zack confirmed. They said that Zorian never liked adventurers who sold magicka on their own. He added that no one knew when the seal on the valley would be lifted again, especially since these magical poisons were not retreating. Moreover, 5 years had already passed since the forest was closed, and people said that this closure could last a very long time. And Zorian had recently raised the tax for adventurers who paid the guild, thus openly showing that he did not care at all about their profession. If this continued, the capital would inevitably wither, and Alberos' voice, full of anxiety, asked if Keter would be okay amid these changes. To this, Zack replied that their skills were quite good, and vital connections with the Monster Hunters community and influential acquaintances remained intact. But with a bunch of newly accepted guild novices, there were fewer and fewer easy tasks. Barney anxiously asked if new waves of adventurers would come to the capital, because their chances were extremely limited even when it came to selling magical devices. And at that moment, Joseph suggested. They began selling those powerful weapons that Barney once forged to defeat the fierce monster in the Rodney Valley. Barney admitted that it was really not easy for him, because creating that particular magical item required a powerful magical ore. He accidentally came across it, but the materials needed for mass production were so rare that constantly mining them was impossible. He added that for adventurers, spending almost all their energy on one shot was completely impractical. At that moment, Scott appeared at the scene and casually asked if Barney was still with them. Seeing him, Barney suggested returning to the workshop together, and Scott immediately agreed. Zack visited him and assured that if blacksmithing ever became too difficult, the guild would always welcome him. But Scott modestly replied that he was already retired. When their brief conversation ended, they said goodbye and went their separate ways. After some time, when Scott and Barney were walking the streets, Scott noticed a thoughtful expression on Barney's face and asked what he was thinking so deeply about, to which Barney admitted he was pondering how to find ways to spread magical tools not only during adventures. Scott jokingly ruffled his hair and, smiling, praised him for his kindness, saying he obviously cares so much about everyone else. As soon as they returned home, Scott noticed a letter in the mailbox and read that it was from the director of the academy, where the letter stated that the owner was deeply impressed by the exquisite craftsmanship of the staff used by his daughter. So they even officially requested to make stands so that the whole school could use them. Moreover, Gulf, Barney, and Scott were stunned. There was demand for as many as 50 such staffs. To their delight, the owner assured that all necessary materials, including the key magical ore, would be provided to them along with the embedded magical circle. And at that very moment, a shimmering, glowing magical circle appeared in the sky above them. When a generous rain of enchanted magicka poured over them, this dazzling spectacle filled them with uncontrollable admiration. And with unwavering determination, they set about fulfilling the request. Meanwhile, at the respected academy, Lucille was enjoying a wonderful day and having lunch with a friend. When Lucille unfolded her sandwich, her friend asked if it was the same popular limited edition, and Lucille confirmed that she had made a special effort to get it. Although she admitted that she terribly missed home-cooked food, her friend assured her that summer holidays would soon begin and she would be able to visit her family. Suddenly, a pigeon gracefully flew in from somewhere and delivered a small folded letter. Lucille's face lit up with pure joy as soon as she read its pleasant content. She admitted that the director, named Regale, had asked her father to make staffs and that they would be delivered soon, so she would see them very soon. She added that when the director approached her, she was just using the staff that Scott made during training. Regale enthusiastically praised the perfect stability of the magical power it directed, believing it was due to the exceptional quality of those tools, but Lucille never thought she would one day ask Scott himself for those very weapons. With a gentle touch, she filled the dove with blessing magic and released it into the sky, while her friend, sincerely happy for Lucille, rejoiced that she would finally see her family again after a long separation. In a moment, she reminded Lucille that it was already time for their lesson, and they rushed to the East Wing for ecology class. Walking through the corridors and looking at the monsters kept nearby in captivity, the The girl said she would never truly feel calm with such creatures on campus. Lucille agreed too. It was still nerve-wracking, even despite the powerful magic that maintained their control. It was then that they noticed a girl slowly approaching the monsters and handing them medicine, and saw that Jean was standing calmly so close to these creatures. Lucille's friend noted that someone might flee at any moment out of fear, and added that the students carrying the monsters were from Mr. Evans' class. As soon as they moved, the monster suddenly began to fiercely resist and completely caught them by surprise. Jean did not panic and instantly unleashed her magic to calm the distressed creature. Lucille and her friend simply froze, amazed at what they saw. Casting a calming spell without an incantation was truly impossible, but Lucille insisted that this did not seem like magic. She did not feel any mana. It seemed as if they were communicating directly. Gina gently stroked the monster, and he clearly rejoiced at her attention. Meanwhile, Lucille stood in awe of the child's incredible abilities. She approached Gina, introducing herself as a student of the magic department, and gently asked about her unusual skills. She also asked what Gina's name was, but when Gina hesitantly introduced herself, she apologized and immediately rushed away from the scene. She left them wondering whether she was just a shy girl. The action shifted to the capital of the Rose Scott's house, where everyone was diligently making weapons to order, working tirelessly day and night to complete each creation with special care. Soon they finished work on all the weapons. Scott sincerely thanked Barney and Alberos for their invaluable help. Now it was time to deliver a large quantity to the academy, and Scott said that transporting so much would really be a big challenge. But as always, Barney already had a ready plan to solve it. Looking at the materials screen, he wondered if Scott had a large leather bag, metal, and some magic or shards at hand. Scotland smiled and replied that the bag and metal were no problem, and after making the staff he still had a few shards of magical ore left. As soon as he got confirmation, Arnie did not hesitate. With a wrist movement he directed his magic skillfully. The items were placed into a strangely sturdy bag, and Scott, as if noticing that it looked ordinary, felt a chill in his chest when Barney skillfully stuffed huge tools into that tiny bag. Barney proudly showed the large magical bag and assured that it would effortlessly hold anything, even items much larger in size. Suddenly Scott joyfully caught him, and Barney waved his hands and exclaimed that he was very embarrassed and that Scott was behaving unusually, like a child. Moreover, Scott proudly said that he was truly glad that Barney appeared in his life, since he was a wonderful engineer of magical instruments even at such a young age. They decided to go to sleep and deliver the goods the next day, completely unaware of the looming danger, because the little monster they tenderly cared for radiated truly dark and ominous energy. The next day, under a clear sky, Scott together with Barney and Alberos arrived at the respected academy. He warmly greeted the guard named Will, his longtime friend, introducing him to his little son as his former respected colleague. Marnie, as always extremely polite, gently responded to the greeting and warmly introduced herself and Alberos. Will froze in surprise when such a divine beast appeared before him. He frankly admitted that he had never seen anything like it in his life. So politely but insistently asked why Scott had come, since his name was indeed on the visitor list. Taking out the official letter, Scott said it was a direct request from the director herself. Flipping through the letter, one is amazed a former adventurer of such caliber had turned into such a skilled blacksmith. Just then Barney intervened and asked what his father was really like. This question truly caught Scott off guard and left him speechless for a moment, but it is worth proudly saying. Scott was a truly promising adventurer, quite unlike the others, and the entire capital knew his name and impressive achievements. He also admitted that he had ended his adventurous life because he sincerely felt he had exhausted his potential and could no longer grow as a traveler. While Scott, on the other hand, gave up adventures to support his family with 2 jobs. Barney's curiosity flared even brighter. He impatiently asked what exactly his father had done for them, but Scott was too embarrassed by old memories to answer. But when you lay a supportive hand on Scott's shoulder, your words of encouragement will boost the confidence of his old friend. Scott suggested Barney meet with Lucille, while he himself would personally deliver the sticks to the director. When they left, he did not notice the mysterious man hiding right behind his back. Soon as Barney moved across the fields of the Royal Academy, he was very surprised to see how spacious it really was there. Albero asked if he had already spoken with Lucille about exactly where they should meet, to which Barney noted that she had invited him to have lunch together in the garden. He decided to rely on the detailed map carefully enclosed in the letter from Lucille. However, he soon noticed the watchful glances of the students and quickly realized they were deeply embarrassed by the unexpected appearance of the divine beast on the academy grounds. In the capital of the Alberos, they were known by face, but to the rest, this majestic creature might have seemed a fierce monster, so it was no wonder everyone stared at it. But Barney could not tolerate when someone looked at his beloved Alberos with such judgmental eyes. To dispel his sadness, Albero gently licked his cheek and soothingly whispered for him not to worry about such trifles. Directly opposite them in the garden sat Gina with a gloomy expression, thinking that those girls might really have wanted to befriend her, and she could not understand why she had fled so cowardly. In her mind, the thought spun that they had probably seen her talking to the monster, but despite this creepy sight, they still approached her personally to talk. At that very moment, Barney approached and sat next to Gina, and beside him quietly clapped Alberos. This gesture truly surprised her. She had no idea that there were other people with the same abilities as hers. She instantly turned to Barney and asked if he also had this strange gift to talk with creatures. He simply replied that he only used a magical device to interpret their words. Then he asked her if she could communicate with monsters, and she confirmed this, though hesitantly, that it felt like a rather strange power, and admitted that she was always called a strange child because she talked to animals. However, Barney just remarked that, in his opinion, it was a truly incredible gift for her. She clearly felt relieved by his sincere, comforting words, and she said that she came from a remote village where there were no children her age, so she usually found company by talking to various animals. Gina admitted that she desperately wanted to make friends at the academy, but when someone recently approached and spoke to her, fear gripped her. She couldn't respond and started to run away. Barney calmly noted that she spoke to him without the slightest fear of the Alberos, and Furtish sincerely admitted that he truly considered her a good person. Hearing such comforting words from him, Gina simply froze in surprise and even said that he somehow reminded her of someone. But before she could say another word, Lucille appeared at the scene and gently greeted her little brother. Seeing Gina is a sudden, frightened reaction of a wandering soul. Barney mentally caught himself thinking, could the one she was talking about be none other than his own sister? Lucille then gently hugged Alberos and jokingly said that they really went there exactly during the incident in the Rodinio Valley. And then she noticed Gina and asked if she knew her brother. And Gina simply replied that it was just a coincidence. Without hesitation, Barney instantly offered Gina to join them for lunch. Seizing the moment, Alberos gently nudged her to join their little company. Soon, when Barney was rummaging in his seemingly tiny bag looking for lunch, Lucille noticed that he seemed to have brought nothing at all. But their initial skepticism instantly turned to surprise when he miraculously pulled out a huge basket. Pulling out a bunch of treats and delicious dishes from the tiny pouch and realizing it was another of his inventions, Lucille praised her reliable engineer of magical tools. Lucille blossomed with joy seeing a real homemade meal after such a long absence, and Barney gently said that Dorothy had specifically asked her to eat well and take good care of herself. While they talked a bit, Lucille learned that Professor Evans personally asked Gina to keep a closer watch on those captive monsters held at the academy. Gina insisted that the professor believed her unique power of words would incredibly help to deal with them. Barney was very surprised the prestigious Royal Academy really kept such monsters behind bars. And then Albero wondered if they were really sure that those creatures would not suddenly launch a fierce attack. But Gina confidently reassured them. The monsters were tightly bound by special magic, and they were mostly given sedatives and medicines to prevent illnesses. Lucille said that they not only raised those monsters, important experiments were underway at the academy. And in the same garden, they nurtured pain-relieving herbs grown specifically for vital pharmacological work. Meanwhile, at the other end of the academy, Regale was on cloud nine. He got such luxurious conditions for his stay. She also admitted that in the future she would depend greatly on Scott's inventions. She proudly said that Lucille's academic achievements were truly impressive and deserved recognition. She told him that Lucille was an excellent student, always studying brilliantly, and recently broke the record for a series of consecutive wins in training battles and was generously rewarded for it. Regale firmly emphasized that this was a direct result of her relentless work, not just because she was a talented sorceress. Scott Bean felt his heart fill with pride when he learned about his daughter's impressive achievements. Regale reassured him Lucille was in the reliable and skilled hands of the academy. When Scott left the room, the same shadowy figure suddenly appeared right in front of him. With a sly smile on his lips, he skillfully began drawing a magic circle to block the director's office, and asked if he had made Scott wait too long. But Scott was not moved at all and sternly demanded that the figure reveal who he really was. But the man refused to say, claiming he did not want to bother the director with his presence. Then he casually called Scott and Barney, which made Scott wonder how he knew their names. When the magic circle sharpened, the figure shouted threateningly that Scott's son had recently ruined her plan. At that moment, a huge sinister crystal form flared up, igniting wild energy in those creatures that had previously been enchanted. At that moment, the monsters in the academy suddenly broke free from their chains and rushed to destroy their chambers, attacking every student they encountered on their way. The sudden noise instantly drew the attention of Barney and the others. But at first, they could not understand why those students were running so desperately. Lucille immediately realized that they were fleeing from the laboratory where monsters were grown. Meanwhile, Gina could not believe her eyes. Those creatures had already caused a real rampage. The creatures she had tenderly cared for all day long continued to destroy everything around with terrible force. Gina screamed, questioning their strange behavior and noticing that poisonous magic was emanating from them. Lassell knew there was no time to hesitate. Immediately drawing her staff, she boldly aimed it at those fierce beasts preparing to attack. But Gina intervened and loudly declared that she would stop them, and when she began to cast a spell, it seemed to have almost no effect on the enraged monsters. When the terrible beast lunged at Gina, Lucille intervened swiftly and saved her from its powerful attack. She immediately cast a frost spell on Monster, but before she could act further, Janet desperately grabbed her sleeves. She burst into tears, shouted that those monsters were not really bad, apologized for not taking good care of them, and begged Lucille not to kill them. Lucille froze for a moment in doubt. Their resolve wavered, while meanwhile the fierce beast was sneaking up on another frightened student, preparing to attack. But Albero boldly appeared and fiercely bit him on the giant horns. He flew across the entire field and loudly shouted to the student to run to a safe place. Meanwhile, Barney was showing the other students how to get out, and the thought spinning in his head was whether it was possible to somehow calm those enraged creatures without destroying them once and for all. When the monster attacked Lucille and Gina, Lucille instantly created a powerful reinforced shield to protect them from the looming threat. But constantly moving and maintaining such a defense was incredibly difficult for her, and she was so eager to use her healing abilities. Barney thought if he could manage to paralyze them even for a moment, Lucille could then use her healing magic. And at that very moment, a brilliant idea flashed in his head. He told her that he would create a device to stop the monsters and begged her to hold them back a little longer. And most amazingly, he said that it was in the Rodinio Valley that he learned what true teamwork strength is. He also suggested that they combine their forces and together overcome this immediate threat. Barney immediately ordered Alberos to take him to the place where Lucille said the anesthetic herbs were located. On the way, he saw wounded students. He felt an urgent need to act quickly. Soon he found himself in her garden, and right in front of them saw the pain-relieving herb. Along with this, he also needed a protective magical stone to make the tool. It was then that Albero declared he would go save the other students and asked if Barney could manage alone. Barney assured Alberos that he would finish quickly and immediately join them. Meanwhile, at the most crucial moment, Albera appeared at the scene of chaos and swiftly saved the frightened students from the relentless attacks of the fierce monster. Without hesitation for a moment, the divine beast boldly rushed at those mad creatures and bit into their thick skin with its razor-sharp fangs. Another huge beast charged and struck Alberos with its powerful horns. His side was torn open and blood began to flow. Stunned by this sudden wound, the students debated whether to resort to fleeing, but in a moment exchanged determined looks, and bravely came to Alberos's aid, boldly defending him with their strength. All the students again felt confident and together helped Alberos. They desperately fought off the rabid monsters, protecting their esteemed academy. Albera froze. Their unexpected determination truly impressed her. On the other hand, Scott confronted that suspicious figure and heard the noise growing outside. He shouted and fiercely demanded to know what the madman had done, and the figure calmly replied that it was just an experiment and that he would not allow Scott or the director to interfere with his grand plans, wasting no time. He summoned a magic circle and cast a dark binding spell on Scott, instantly rendering him completely immobile. He also said that Scott seemed to be a close combat fighter, which unfortunately did not suit his magic at all. Moreover, he slyly smiled and said that even a once famous traveler had fallen so easily under his magic, it saved him a lot of time and effort. But his confident smile instantly faded when he realized that Scott effortlessly broke free from his magic. At that moment, Scott skillfully appeared behind him and pressed a dagger to the man's neck, coldly adding that although it was just a short overview dagger for self-defense, it could easily cut off his head. Then he demanded to know his true purpose and asked what torments he had inflicted on innocent students. The man remained completely silent, unable to understand how Scott had bypassed his magic with brute force alone. But with a light wave of his hand, he immediately broke free from Scott's grip, cast an offensive spell, and aimed it directly at Scott. Scott could hardly believe his eyes. The man remained unharmed, although he himself had cast the attacking spell. But the man lunged at him again and boldly shouted that if you rely only on speed, you just have to outrun Scott. But when Scott tried to strike, the man remained unharmed and with a mocking smile said that all his attempts were in vain. With another spell, the man unleashed a powerful explosive attack on Scott, and he crashed into the nearest wall with a thud. He mockingly said that a former adventurer like Scott could never defeat him, implying that he better just give up and be silent. At that moment, a vivid image of a beloved family flashed before his eyes, and with a decisive wave of his hand, he firmly said that he was indeed a retired adventurer. But he was also a blacksmith ready to do anything to protect his dearest family. At that very moment, a storm of knives rose above the man's head. He was completely frozen with surprise and the knives struck instantly, but the man barely avoided that precise attack. Scott quickly got to his feet and, surprisingly, found himself right behind the man, noticing a clear symbol on the back of his cloak. At the same time, the students are struggling with their last strength not to fall behind these formidable monsters. At that moment, Barney appeared, armed with a newly crafted sleeping crossbow, and unleashed a hail of arrows on the enraged beasts. Instantly calmed them and sent them to sleep. Barney created that amazing instrument only from anesthetic curves, magical stones, benchwood, and iron. He immediately returned to Lucille, who seemed to no longer be able to endure, and quickly ordered them to lie on the ground. He carefully aimed at an especially large monster, and released an arrow with calculated precision. Unfortunately, the anesthetic hardly affected that monster. It instantly regained control. He could not understand at all what was happening here. But surprisingly, Professor Evans appeared and asked why those monsters were going mad from the magical poison. Gina instantly exclaimed that she gave them the medicine he asked for, and he shuddered at her words. He indignantly insisted that the magical poisonous potion he gave was supposed to calm and protect from diseases. That's what the mysterious man said. The man Evans mentioned instantly aroused suspicion in Barney, and Gina simply could not believe that these creatures behaved that way because of the very medicine she gave them. Her eyes filled with tears, she blamed herself for the riots throughout the academy, and it was clear she was breaking down. Lucille advised her to look around. He insisted that everyone was doing everything they could to at least somewhat tame this chaos, and also asked if she would just give up like that. With a resolute voice, she ordered Gina to pull herself together and help save those students who were fighting for their lives. She turned to Barney and sharply commanded him to attack once more to seize the moment and cast the decisive healing spell, while Gina gathered herself again. She decided that she must save all the students connected to her and simultaneously help Lucille amid this chaos. And at that very moment, she resolutely grabbed the staff together with Lucille and began to utter her spell. Yan decided to make one last desperate attempt to reach the tormented monsters. Meanwhile, Lucille ordered Barney to hit them again with anesthesia as soon as she gave the precise signal. Gina tried to break into the chaotic mind of the beast to calm its rage. She promised that she would no longer let it suffer. All her sincere efforts were in vain. The magical poison seemed to silence her voice, preventing it from reaching the consciousness of that creature. Although Lucille calmed down a bit thanks to her brother's timely intervention, it was still too dangerous to lower her guard even for a moment. But for her healing magic to work best, she had to get much closer to that mad beast. Lucille had never before tried to simultaneously maintain a force shield and cast a double healing spell. She was not entirely sure she would succeed on the first try, and even if she did, the healing power would most likely be much weaker than usual. But at that crucial moment, she could only imagine it that way. At that crucial moment, Gina promised to fully trust her, just as Lucille trusted Gina. She set out to completely end this chaos, so she immediately strengthened the defense and sharpened her vigilance. Pushing Barney to attack, he did not hesitate and skillfully unleashed a volley of anesthetic arrows in his direction. Meanwhile, Lucille tensely activated her healing power, which instantly enhanced the soothing effect of those anesthetic arrows. At the same time, Gina activated her unique abilities and tried once again to communicate with the distressed creature, apologizing for causing it such unbearable pain and assuring that she never intended to inflict so much suffering. She admitted that back then, in her isolated life, she had no friends, but it was precisely because of this that her school years were not so cruel. When the beast slowly came to its senses, Gina once again promised to help everyone as soon as this chaos passed. She sincerely repeated that they were all incredibly dear to her. Lucille assured that she was nearby at that time, and these words lit up Gina's face with a grateful smile. Combining their magical powers, they promised to save everyone, and the beasts that were once fierce immediately became gentler. The powerful body finally relaxed. It fell to the ground exhausted and unconscious. Without hesitation, Gina instantly rushed and firmly, soothingly hugged it, and Barney joined Lucille and they exchanged a victorious high five. Meanwhile, Scott was still fiercely fighting that mysterious man, who again launched a sudden attack, but Scott successfully dodged. He did not calm down, relentlessly attacked with his lightning-fast dagger, and the man miraculously remained unharmed, and immediately took off his hood, noting that Scott was quite resilient but equally annoying. With a heavy sigh, he admitted that he did not plan to fight him fully, but circumstances forced them to be here. With a sharp snap of his fingers, he created a dark, eerie magical circle. From it burst a powerful, sinister stream of energy, which gathered into a towering, monstrous shadow looming behind the man. But Scott just snorted and said that anything less than this challenge was not worth his time at all. Unexpectedly, the wall right behind the mysterious man cracked loudly, and from the cracked opening, a mighty hand emerged and instantly threw a reinforced chain, a chain of power that immediately bound both the man and the tall shadow behind him. With an irritated frown, the man noted, that's exactly why he wanted to lock up the respected director of the academy. Rigel firmly stated that this man definitely knows how to cause chaos in other people's institutions. To everyone's surprise, the man seemed to dissolve, his silhouette faded into nothing. Smiling sinisterly, he said he had already gathered enough results. Scott hadn't even managed to do anything when the man completely disappeared, mockingly bidding him farewell. The scene smoothly shifted to the academy courtyard, where the chaos was finally tamed. Professor Evans, with shoulders hunched in guilt, apologized to everyone, believing it was his fault, and Gina asked if those administered medicines could have been the real cause. And that several doses could have driven the creatures mad. Heavens confirmed that this was most likely the main reason, although it was still unclear whether other factors had also contributed to the rage. Lucille sharply asked where he got those medicines, and he admitted that a little earlier a man in a hood approached them to test a sleeping potion made from magical poison on the monsters they were raising at the academy. But since he himself took care of the monsters, he couldn't just allow strange substances to be given to them without thorough examination. But the man handed him an official state document, as if proof that these medicines calm and prevent diseases. He reached out his hand to the letter to show the king's signature. It exploded wildly and immediately burst into flames, and everyone froze in shock, not believing their eyes. Lucille immediately blurted out that it seemed the man had resorted to some kind of magic to skillfully hide all traces of evidence. When Barney asked more about that man, Evans replied that he never revealed his identity or affiliation, but a government document as proof is not something an ordinary person could obtain, and this only strengthened the suspicion that he might be a high-ranking official or someone connected to very influential structures. But now, when even that decisive evidence turned to ashes, there was no clear testimony left. And at that moment Scott and Rigel appeared. And suddenly he brought with him the fabric abandoned by the man. Seeing him wounded, Lucille hurried to her father with eyes full of deep anxiety and asked how he was. He replied that some mysterious man attacked the director's office, and probably it was he who sold Evans those medicines. He admitted that he briefly noticed a distinct mark on the piece of fabric left by the man, and when Barney asked about it with Scott revealed that it was the emblem of the Royal Corps of Magical Defense. But despite this, Rigel said that the academy was seriously and unquestionably harmed, even if Evans truly did not intend to cause damage. With a resolute voice, she stated that she could not approve of his unilateral actions in any way, and added that this serious matter would be brought up for discussion with others to decide how to proceed regarding his involvement. Evans bowed deeply before her and said he would take full responsibility for the consequences. When everyone began to disperse, Scott seriously called Barney closer. He told his son that the criminal clearly knew about them and the troubling adventure in Native Valley, and then asked if Barney had encountered anyone suspicious during his recent travels. Barney replied that he had seen no one like that. He prompted Scott to say that for now they should just keep going. As he walked away, Barney could not shake the terrible thought: what if the monster in the Rodney Valley is not natural? Instead, it was a creature consciously summoned and released by the same man. He could not understand why this sinister figure was harming his friends and loved ones. But he knew for sure this dangerous enemy would strike again. With unwavering determination, he decided in the meantime to become even stronger, to become their guardian and stand in the way of any danger approaching his dearest ones. Soon in Rigel's office, everyone who was present during the recent outbreak took turns sharing their most important observations with the director. Summarizing their conversation, she realized that the man who attacked them and the one who offered the drug were probably the same person. She had seen his power with her own eyes and could hardly believe it. Perhaps he was from the elite magical corps of the kingdom. Most likely, they were facing a powerful force that could rival their own. Meanwhile, Scott noted with a worried expression that this could indeed turn out to be much more troublesome than they initially imagined. For now, Rigel announced the end of the meeting, but she firmly assured them that the academy would secretly continue its thorough investigation, and everyone began to disperse. She gently touched Barney and quietly asked if they could stay alone for a moment. Scott said he would patiently wait outside for now, and they meanwhile comfortably settled on the sofa. She shyly apologized for having interrupted him so suddenly a little earlier, and immediately remembered his weapon, which had more than once wonderfully subdued furious monsters at the academy. Barney modestly admitted that it was not only by his own efforts. He also borrowed several necessary materials from the academy to create that magical instrument. Rigel politely asked if he would agree to show her that unique magical instrument. When he pulled it out of the tiny pouch, she carefully examined the weapon. In addition, she praised his courage and said that he truly inherited an incredible talent. It turned out that magical instrument engineers in that country were a real rarity, and this weapon was something that only a truly trained mage could create. Only a few had ever reached such a level of mastery, and very little was known about them. Barney had not fully understood how important it was before, but hearing it directly from the director herself, he finally felt he was doing something truly extraordinary, and the power of the chosen craft simply captivated him. Rigel added that, although the academy traditionally prioritized magic and combat professions, currently there is not a single student with a craft specialty. For the future of the academy, she sincerely stated that she wants to learn more about the profession of magical instrument engineer. Since Barney was currently the only magical instrument engineer she knew, she sincerely and fervently asked him to consider enrolling in the Royal Academy for his future studies. Barney's eyes widened in surprise when he heard her unexpected request. He objected that he was only 6 and did not really understand magic. Seeing his initial resistance, Rigel took on an icy expression and spoke in a cold tone. She sharply hinted that it seemed he might be taking their expensive anesthetic herb from the academy without permission for various homemade stalls. Her sudden change in behavior instantly changed his reaction, and he no longer said he would think about her proposal. Leaving the building, Barney froze at Rigel's sudden change in behavior. But only he truly knew his strength alone would not be enough to overcome all the trials. Also, seeing the huge mess in the yard, he simply stood still. And Scott, who was on site, was convinced. Together they could fix a whole bunch of things: his blacksmith skills and Barney's incredible craftsmanship. Resolutely, Scott and Barney joined forces to repair the caused damage, and the entire student body rushed together to support them. Fortunately, Will was practically fine. He only had a broken bone, and Lucille immediately tried to heal him with her magic. Meanwhile, Barney noticed a student who gestured for him to come closer and urgently asked for help to fix a severely damaged part of the building. Barney immediately got to work and with effortless skill restored the area with his magic in a matter of seconds. At that very moment, another group of students approached them, and gratitude shone on their faces. And deeply bowed before Alberos, thanking him for bravely saving their lives. Alberos calmly brushed off their praise. They spoke quietly and with dignity that in trouble there is nothing more important than helping each other. But one of the students said that, seeing how the divine beast so zealously helps them, they understood. A friend or enemy should not be judged by appearance. What matters more is what is in their soul and how they act. They resolutely vowed that they would definitely become better and much stronger like Alberos, who saves others without a moment's hesitation. And Barney meanwhile sincerely took pride that Alberos finally received the recognition he deserved. In another corner of the academic courtyard, Lucille elegantly sneaked up behind Gina, who was diligently sweeping the academy grounds. Gina asked if she was done with the guard, and Lucille immediately agreed and reached out her hand to help with the cleaning. Lucille inquired what would happen to those monsters that Gina so tenderly cared for, and Gina happily replied that Rigel allowed her to continue looking after them. But warned, until the chaos is completely tamed, they will have to be chained more tightly. Lucille said that maybe it would take some time before everything returned to normal, and sincerely added that she wants to care for those creatures together with Gina and become true friends with them at that very moment. Her friends arrived at the scene. They immediately hugged her tightly and said with relief that they were very glad to see her safe and sound, confessing that they were terribly scared when they watched from afar how bravely she fought those monsters, but also admired her incredible courage and amazing magical abilities. Lucille modestly replied that their success was the result of the joint efforts of everyone. Unexpectedly, they turned to Gina and also praised her unique powers. They introduced themselves Karen and Melissa, and with a warm smile asked if she would also like to become their friend. With a joyful glow on her face, Gina instantly agreed and enthusiastically shook their hands, while Lucille stood nearby with a warm, touching smile. Later that evening, near the main exit of the academy, everyone gathered to warmly and sincerely say goodbye to Scott and Barney. As they were returning by carriage, Scott asked if the director intended to accept Barney into the esteemed academy, and Barney confirmed. However, he added that although Rigel praised him to the skies, a recent event opened his eyes. He still desperately needed to strengthen his skills. Although the power of the magical tools was quite sufficient, it did not fully affect the most powerful monster, and Barney believed it was due to his lack of skills. But Scott convinced himself that he was the one who desperately needed to become stronger. He firmly knew he could not allow the enemy another chance to escape. It was painful to see that his movements were now noticeably less agile than when he was at his peak. He decided to personally settle the score with that trickster as soon as their paths crossed again. Then he thoughtfully told Barney about the remote village of Stone, hidden deep in the verdant Dagon region, and recalled that when he first set out on his adventurer's journey, someone in that very village kindly took care of him. Not far away was a mine where many magical stones could be found. He admitted that he was soon going there to undergo the training himself and asked if Barney wanted to go with him. Barney jumped for joy upon hearing such an exciting offer, and eagerly inquired whether he really did not mind if he joined. Meanwhile, Scott was deeply pondering his original intention: to protect their native family from any danger, no matter what happens. Later, within the walls of the academy, Rigel urgently informed the trusted member of the royal family, the Honorable Lord Matthews, about the recent alarming event. She confessed that due to suspicions of forging important documents and involvement of the Royal Magical Corps, she came to him herself to deliver this decisive report. She directly asked if he knew even a little about these incidents, and he categorically replied that he knew nothing, and immediately turned back to inquire about Barney instead. Just at that moment, Zorian came up, and quietly said that he seemed to have overheard some truly disturbing rumors spreading. As soon as the Zorians arrived, Meishes immediately moved on to the most important thing, and asked if he knew about the critical situation that had just unfolded at the Royal Academy of Magic. Zorian resolutely refuted this assertion in response. He could not just sit idly by due to the involvement of the kingdom's magical core and forge documents after all. It was his responsibility, so he promised to immediately start a thorough investigation at the academy, acting under the direct instructions of the next king, Prince Baker. He then threw a sly smile and asked if Matthias would fully agree to this investigation. Matthias instantly subdued his barely noticeable anxiety and gave him the necessary permission. And at the same time, he casually asked Zorian to inform his brother that he would be stepping out briefly. After all, there was one extremely important person he urgently needed to meet. A few days later, Barney and Scott arrived in the same village, and Barney's heart pounded with excitement. He jumped to his feet and exclaimed that he could definitely see a huge mine emerging on the horizon. Scott told him that although Stone Village is very small now, it once teemed with life, all because of the rich magical ore nearby. When the fuss over that school incident finally died down, Scott specifically brought Barney to that village to extract more magical ore, so Barney was burning with impatience to explore the surroundings. He remembered how he had asked Dorothy for permission for this trip back then. She confidently stated that Scott came to that village with one single purpose: to meet that very person. Barney felt suspicious that Scott had some other purpose as well. Something was amiss in the air. Alberos, who was also walking with them, told Scott that the surrounding forest seemed connected to the thickets they had encountered earlier and asked if everything was all right with that. Scott assured that the forest right near the village was indeed blocked off, but cautiously noted that it would be safe if everyone kept their distance and urged not to lose vigilance. Soon they found themselves on the outskirts of Kamien Silo. Barney was bursting with enthusiasm and genuinely delighted at the opportunity to explore the quiet village, while Scott wisely suggested first greeting the village head. The further they moved through the village, the stronger Barney felt a strange sensation, as if there were almost no people here. Alberos also added to his observation that there was no liveliness here at all. It was at that moment they came across a small group of men gathered in the center, and Barney instantly rushed forward without hesitation, but their strong and wary reaction caught him by surprise. They showered him with strange questions, interrogating who he was and what he wanted from them. However, Scott appeared casually and calmly informed them. Their sole purpose was simple: to visit the head of the sales department and ask if he knew where that person was. Zelves, who was standing nearby, immediately recognized Scott. His gaze softened, and he asked if this was really the same Scott he once knew. When Scott warmly greeted him, Zill immediately approached, smiled, and said that Scott had indeed toughened up significantly since the last time, sincerely apologized for the crowd's initial rude behavior, and instantly invited them into his home. Later, comfortably settled in Zella's house, he inquired how Scott was feeling in general. Scott replied that he had given up traveling and now proudly runs the forge in the capital. Zell looked at Barney and Alberos and asked who they were to him. Scott introduced them as his beloved son and his magnificent divine being, and this truly stunned Zell. He could not comprehend that the same Scott he knew had now become a father. To stun him even more, Scott confessed that Barney was actually his second son, and also mentioned his elder son and daughter. Then he solemnly introduced Barney to Zell, the village head, and his respected mentor. It was also said that Zell was a very skilled warrior and also masterfully wielded offensive magic. Barney was truly delighted when he finally met his father's legendary master. Zell sincerely thanked them from the bottom of his heart for coming all the way to his humble village, and honestly admitted that he would have entertained them much better if not for the unfortunate disorder in the village. Hearing this, Scott immediately asked how things were in the village. It seemed to have become completely different and undoubtedly gloomier than before. Zales told him that 5 years ago there was a massive collapse in the neighboring Dagon mine. Surprisingly, no one died, but many people were seriously injured. The mine was quickly sealed, and when the vital trade stopped, many residents left the village. Having felt this, Marnie turned to Alberos and said that it was then they first met in that forest. It turned out the mine was indeed connected to that forest, and a dark expression appeared on Barney's face as he wondered if it was just a coincidence that both events happened almost simultaneously. Zill also added that the rest of the villagers were completely on edge due to the circumstances, so he sincerely asked Scott to forgive their previous rudeness. At that moment, a woman approached, leaning on a crutch because of an injured leg, and kindly offered them some tea. When she returned, Scott asked if she had also been hurt in the mine collapse, but Zell waved it off. He had just found her unconscious near the forest, so he kindly took her inch had nowhere else to go. He sighed and regretted that if only they could restore the village buildings and prepare well, they could invite the much-needed doctor to the village. Barney and Scott exchanged knowing glances right in front of Barney. Full of energy, he jumped up and gladly offered to fix the entire village himself. Without saying a word, he immediately ran out of the house. filled with determination to fix all the damage. He repaired broken things in the village one by one, and when the children, completely innocent, asked, he gladly took on fixing the swings and slides in the playground. Having seen the impressive demonstration of Barney's abilities, Zeld was pleasantly surprised that he could fix things so easily and skillfully. It became a real relief for the village, which was desperately suffering from a lack of qualified craftsmen. Moreover, he turned to Scott and said that he definitely knew how to notice talents, but immediately got down to business. He said he knew perfectly well. Scott came there not just to exchange simple greetings. Scott no longer hid his intentions and directly asked Zills to teach him again, formally addressing him as master. When Zill asked that question, the reason for his sudden decision to resume training was revealed. Scott admitted that he never once regretted giving up the life of an adventurer, and there were indeed things that only such a skilled blacksmith as he could do. But with the strength he had now, he simply could not fully protect his beloved family. Now he truly felt the urgent need to become stronger than ever during his adventures. Fortunately, his children grew up strong and resilient, and boldly chased their dreams. As their father, he had to protect them from every looming threat. Then he bowed low before Ziels and pleaded to be taught once again. Ziel firmly placed his hand on Scott's shoulder, and in a soft, almost proud tone, remarked that Scott had truly become a wonderful father while he wasn't looking. Moreover, he said that now he had to repay the boundless kindness he had received from his wonderful son. But when Zil pressed the stick right against him, he coldly said that he would start training him only on one condition Scott already knew. His methods were not for the faint-hearted, they were relentless and demanded absolute dedication. Zels laughed loudly and added, if Scott really wanted to take it on, he would undoubtedly sharpen him to perfect form in no time. Meanwhile, with a thoughtful smile, he approached the wounded woman who inquired about his sudden appearance. He gently mentioned her noticeable injuries. She replied that she was hurt due to a mine collapse. But fortunately, she was already recovering. The villagers were incredibly kind to her. Suddenly, Barney eagerly rummaged through his small pouch, searching for the remaining piece of magical ore left after forging the staff. He sincerely said that he wanted to make a special tool that would directly help her heal. He immediately asked her to sit on the chair nearby. Focused and precise, he prepared all the necessary materials. And concentrating, he activated his magical powers and carefully molded a tool that best served her needs. Mixing those materials, he crafted a device that resembled ordinary plaster, assuring that if she wore it, her healing power would double. Although it did not have the instant power of direct healing magic, Barney confidently said that it would definitely speed up her recovery significantly. The woman sincerely thanked him for the invaluable help, and Barney insisted that she allow him to carefully apply the device to her leg while he gently unwrapped those old bandages. The mysterious tattoo on her leg was as visible as on the palm of a hand, but he paid it no attention. His entire gaze was on working with the tool. She thanked him again sincerely, but admitted that she had no money to repay him. Barney gently waved off her worries and said that he was sincerely glad his skills were able to help someone in trouble. Just then she asked why he had come to the village, but before he could answer, Scott knocked on the door and called them to come out. Barney respectfully bowed to her and left, completely unaware that there was definitely something eerily strange and disturbing about her. Instead, Barney went outside and immediately asked if anyone needed help. Scott told him that there was a food storeroom on the outskirts of the village and asked Barney to help carry some food. Barney instantly agreed, and Zell apologized for the trouble. Houses in the village, unfortunately, were falling apart, but at least recently there was much more food. He added that the ruler of the Dragon Land had recently changed, and they desperately needed to secure food supplies for the village. Scott doubted was the new lord really a well-known person. Zell confirms this. It turned out he was a person who could be trusted, who unconditionally put the welfare of his people above all else. He told Scott that the man had now gone on an inspection, and added that they should definitely greet him when he returns. And just then everyone heard a loud noise rushing through the quiet village. And when they rushed to the source, they came across a severely wounded soldier, covered in blood. Suddenly he fell to the ground right in front of them, and everyone immediately rushed to the wounded soldier. He assumed that the rest of his companions could not be far considering the severity of the wounds and the distance he had already traveled. Thinking again, Zell decided that they needed to go forward to save the others, and immediately asked the women nearby to take care of the wounded soldier who had fallen. Scott insisted that they split up to search and that Alberos should catch the blood trail, but Zell's decisively rejected this proposal. He already roughly knew where to look, so under Zell's decisive leadership they immediately rushed to the suspicious place. He exclaimed that this must be the retinue of Lord Rios, and this clearly indicated that some terrible misfortune had occurred during their inspection. Soon an overturned cart appeared on their path, broken and abandoned right in front of them. Now Zels was completely sure. This really was the Lord's carriage and they had indeed been attacked. Albero, with sharp alert senses, instinctively warned everyone, be on guard. As soon as they approached the chaotic scene, the smell of human blood grew stronger in the air. They came upon exhausted soldiers desperately fighting a huge fierce boar, armed only with swords, while the boar glared fiercely at them. The monster immediately lunged at them with lightning speed. But reacting instantly, Scott rushed at the monster with his faithful dagger and delivered a powerful and precise strike to a vital spot, immobilizing it for several crucial seconds. Everyone was simply stunned by his incredible strength and courage, and Zeal, eyes wide with amazement, noted that it was an exceptionally accurate strike to the very critical spot. To their mutual surprise, the creature quickly recovered, and this clearly showed that before them was no ordinary monster. The monster stood up again and let out a thunderous roar that echoed through the dense forest. Unexpectedly, an arrow flew in and pierced his thick skull through and through. And Barney appeared, a sharp shooter who really wanted his incredible, improved crossbow to finally work this time. To their surprise, the opponent stumbled and finally fell to the ground, and Barney emerged victorious again. His incredible skills and amazing abilities prevailed. Suddenly, Lord Matthew appeared with his assistant Ranber, and immediately praised Barney for his incredible strength and accuracy. When he saw him, Zell clearly sighed with relief. Matthews had escaped alive. Meanwhile, Matthews confessed they were attacked while returning from an inspection. But he said the escort was meager, so the situation was extremely dangerous. He could hardly believe his eyes. Barney really was as powerful as the rumors said, and Barney himself had no idea about those talks. Matthews explained that he had heard about Barney's brilliant victory in the Rodinio Valley and about the recent incident at the Royal Academy. Extending his hand with a warm smile on his face, he said he never thought they would meet so unexpectedly. When Barney shook his hand and politely asked who he was, Zell stepped forward and said he was the respected Lord of Stone Village, Lord Mattias. In addition, Matthews revealed a shocking truth. He was the second prince of the kingdom of Raltuba, a revelation that truly stunned both Scott and Barney. Soon they were led to the magnificent estate where Matthew lived. Walking through the corridors, Barney thought to himself. He had never imagined that on the outskirts of this modest village there was such an impressive place, and it seemed to him that for a prince of his status it was somewhat risky to remain in such a remote corner. Matthews once again sincerely thanked them both for rescuing him from a truly dangerous situation. Scott immediately extended a helping hand and said to the prince, "Just say if you need help with soldiers." Matthias thanked him again, but added that he had already entrusted this particular matter to the Zeals. When he responded so modestly, Barney thought he had always imagined the prince to be much more formidable, and was pleasantly surprised by his kindness. At that moment, Scott sharply asked why he had brought them to his mansion. Then Matthias admitted he sincerely wanted to ask them for cooperation. He added that there were several reasons why he became the Lord of Stone Village, and all of them were truly significant. But it seemed that suspicious figures were constantly coming and going in the forest near the village, the same one that was under the control of the Royal Mage Squad. And this constant surveillance was also part of his personal investigation. He claimed that it was almost impossible for ordinary civilians to sneak into the forbidden zone of the magical units, and that spoke for itself. The information about these intruders was true. 5 long years went into the first investigation in the forest, where the magical poison mysteriously appeared for the first time, but it still remains unsolved. And at the same time, recent reports began to appear about members of the magical unit mentioned during the alarming incident at the academy. Matthews admitted that when he decided to visit the forest himself, he felt that his life was under direct threat. At that very moment, his assistant intervened and added that the unusually large monster that appeared in the Rodney Valley should not naturally exist here. Alarming reports about mutated monsters at the academy and, now even a direct attack on His Majesty on the same day. Their deep suspicions grew into unwavering certainty. It seems the magical unit was the one who summoned those huge monsters. Matthias realized that their immediate goal was to protect the sinister secrets hidden in the depths of the forest. The monsters from Rodney Valley and the recent incident at the academy were most likely nothing more than terrible experimental test subjects, and Matthews carefully put everything together. Now understanding that all these cases were connected, a completely stunned Barney exclaimed and asked how the magical unit could commit such terrible acts, even attempting the life of the prince. Moreover, Matthias informed them, although the ultimate goal was still in question, the mastermind of this affair undoubtedly hid in the very heart of the kingdom, one who effortlessly controlled the powerful magical device. It was visible to the naked, either were quite a few dissatisfied people in the royal family. That is why he fervently sought the unique power of Barney's magical instruments that had so brilliantly solved both previous cases. Feeling his such sincere request, Barney asked himself in his soul whether he was truly capable of participating in matters on which the very fate of the nation depended. Matthias did not back down and resolutely repeated that Barney was indeed considered the only master of magical instruments in the entire country. He felt that this was extremely important, and that was why he so desperately needed Barney's help. When he approached Barney, he resolutely declared that he would not allow anything that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom, and would do everything to ensure lasting peace for his people. Then he gently, with hope, placed his hand on Barney's shoulder and sincerely asked him for extremely important help to protect these dearest people. Barney thought long and deeply. He was born an engineer of magical instruments, and there were things that only he could truly do. He had many reliable comrades, but above all in this world he valued family. If his strength could at least slightly protect his loved ones, he would not hesitate to extend a helping hand. It was especially painful because in his past life he knew nothing. He firmly shook Matthew's hand and agreed to his bold plan. Meanwhile, Scott also extended a helping hand to him. Matthew knelt before them and sincerely thanked them for the invaluable support. But now he wanted to find out what they should do next, which steps were the most important. He admitted that he wanted to strengthen their troops a little more, and intended to return to the capital to carefully put things in order. Barney immediately told him that there were indeed people to rely on in the capital, when he could fully trust in such matters. Meanwhile, the woman who cunningly pretended to be wounded decisively walked on her 2 legs into the deep forest, whispered a spell, and summoned a sinister raven, to which she quickly tied a note to its paw. And he released it into the dark sky.